Do you reckon we should let 100,000 people into Australia in the next month? I think that's a cracking idea. Let more in. Boost the economy, get some more GDP, get some more turnover. Not bad. Yeah, but what about the housing stock? Don't worry about it. We'll figure that out later. Let's talk about some facts. In February 2024, we saw over 100,000 immigrants come into Australia. And we're on track to see over 600,000 people enter into Australia in the next 12 months. Now, that's a really big number, and it's going to have a significant impact on Australia's economy and Australia's property market. Now, as we all know, there is a supply and demand equation when it comes to property, from an investment point of view and from an owner-occupied point of view. And if you're out there renting, you certainly know it because there's obviously less stock, less supply, and more demand as more people move from overseas and interstate into different regions. And in particular, as I talk about a lot, Southeast Queensland, because that's where my buyer's agency Purpose Property specialises. Now, net permanent and long-term arrivals in February 2024 were 105,460 people in just 28 days. Now, this is the first time ever net monthly migration has exceeded 100,000 people in just 1 month. It's 19% higher than the previous record from February 2023, which was 88,810 people. Now, the increase in immigration has also seen a significant increase in property prices, even though we've seen interest rates rise 10 plus times in the last 18 months. Property prices are high, vacancy rates are at all-time lows, and this has been driven by that supply-demand equation. Demand has dramatically increased as we've seen more people enter into the country and also move interstate up here into the Brisbane market. It's getting pretty tough out there, whether you're an owner-occupier or an investor. Should we reduce these immigration numbers and focus less on Australia's economic growth and also look at Australia's property market and how we can address this supply-demand imbalance? Now, it is not all doom and gloom. There are some positives to immigration policy. More people moving into Australia's market means we're going to have more people working and a stronger economy, and we can also fill some of those skill shortages in IT, in infrastructure, in finance. There's a lot of demand for those jobs to be filled by skilled workers. And all these people need a place to live, which could in turn stimulate construction and therefore continue boosting Australia's economy. But let's get real. On the flip side, I think there are more challenges with what's happening in Australia's market. This influx of people is putting a strain on Australia's economy, and the major cities like Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane, Perth and Adelaide even, are seeing significant demand driving up property prices and essentially putting people in a tough situation with their living circumstances. So what could the government do to address this situation? I mean, the first point of call would be to potentially reduce the amount of numbers coming into Australia until we have the supply meeting the demand of people coming in. Now, the chart that you can see on screen shows you net monthly overseas permanent and long-term arrivals compared to monthly dwelling approvals. So for effective immigration planning to take place, we would need to see dwelling approvals keep up with the net arrivals moving into Australia. Now, you can see we had a massive dip of people moving into Australia during that COVID period. But on the flip side, we've seen this significant influx of people moving in, and this is the boom we're seeing in 2023 and 2024 of immigration happening here in Australia. But as you can see, the trend of dwelling approvals is actually on the decline. And as you can see on the graph here, there's only about 10 to 15,000 properties being approved each month versus 30, 40, even 45,000 people moving in any given month into Australia's market. What we really want to see is supply keeping up with demand, and that will allow an alleviation on property prices and allow homeowners to break into the market, allow investors to still buy affordable stock and create rental stock for people. But at this point, given the supply and demand equation, I don't see that changing anytime soon. Now, chart number 2 also looks at net permanent and long-term arrivals in the 12 months to February 2024. And as you can see here, we've had a massive spike in people moving into Australia's market in 2024, getting up to the 500,000 people mark. So in addition to effective immigration planning, we need to have an investment in housing stock. We also need fast-track development approvals. It is actually super difficult to get a development application and to start a project and see it all the way through to completion here in Australia. It's great that we have high building standards. We have probably the best quality product in the world when it comes to building property. But on the flip side, it is an arduous and time-consuming and expensive process here in Australia. If you think here in Southeast Queensland, just as an example, to buy a block of land is roughly around $300K for a cheap block in the outer suburbs. Now, if you want to build a specky home that's brick and tile, 4-bed, 2-bath, 2-car, then that's going to set you back somewhere between $300,000 to $450,000. So to just create a new asset here in Australia's market, when you look at the land component of $300K and you look at the underlying cost to construct the asset of around $400,000, just to build an average 4-bed, 2-bath home in the outer suburbs is at least $700,000. So what do I think is going to happen to Australian property moving forward? Unfortunately, the real response is property looks like it's only on an upwards trajectory just due to this supply and demand imbalance. I like to think about it in two ways. When people ask, Luke, isn't there just going to be a property crash at some point? I like to think about a floor, and I like to think about the ceiling of Australian property. That floor is exactly like we spoke about before. About before. It's exactly like we spoke about before. The floor is set by the cost of land, the cost of labor, and the cost of materials. So you've got land, labor, and materials. Now, if your floor is roughly $700,000 just for the average specky home, then that's going to create a base price for existing property. So your rundown houses in half-decent areas are going to get more and more expensive because the land is growing in terms of value and in terms of demand for that type of property in that area. Now, when we look at the ceiling is being driven up by financial policies. So how much money can the banks lend people? The more money the banks can lend people, the more people can pay for property, and the cycle continues. So the ceiling is being increased. Banks are improving their policies to allow people to get access to more money, and we've got more people coming into Australia's market, which is driving up the demand. So the ceiling is going up and up and up. Now, what is happening is the floor's increasing and the ceiling's increasing, and that's where we're seeing property prices continue to rise within that band. So going forward over 2024, 2025, the next 3 years, unless something significantly changes and we have a massive change in immigration policy, or we have a floodgate opening of supply come onto Australia's market, which neither of those changes seem to be taking place, then I expect property prices to continue to rise into the near future and even the mid to long term on that basis because of this complex issue. It's such a big beast for Australia to try and address the immigration policy and the supply and the housing market. Housing is tied into almost every component of Australia's economy. But I think it's still important to have these open conversations, address where the property market is at the moment and where it's heading, and how you can potentially make the best decisions for your own situation. Maybe you're renting at the moment and you're wanting to break into the market as an owner-occupier. Well, looking at the trajectory of the Australian market, it might make sense for you to buy sooner rather than later. Or if you're an investor and you're looking at areas that are in very strong demand, then go and buy in locations that are going to see that significant demand of immigration from overseas and interstate, driving up the property prices over the short to mid to long term. Now, my heart goes out to people who are struggling with the rental prices, struggling to find a property, and struggling to build their wealth. The rich are getting richer in these circumstances. The people who have 10, 20, 30, $100 million worth of property are seeing assets inflate. And the people who aren't able to break into the market and get their snowball rolling in terms of building their asset base are going to get further and further behind. I was chatting with someone the other day and explaining that if your wages and your savings aren't keeping up with the growth in property prices, it makes it harder and harder for you to break in. So I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. What can we do to address this property market here in Australia? Where are you putting your money based on these circumstances? Drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and if you're looking for a Brisbane-based buyer's agent to buy your own home or buy an investment property here in the greater Brisbane market, then head over to purposeproperty.com.au to have a chat. Oh, and before you go, make sure you click this video over here because YouTube really thinks you'll like this one. Thanks for sticking around. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.